All right, so get ready for this one.
Oh, yeah.
We're going deep on political LLM.
Sounds a little, technical.
Yeah, kind of sci-fi, right?
Right.
But really, it's all about how AI,
Yeah.
specifically large language models, LLMs as they're called,
Mm-hmm.
are changing how we look at politics.
Yeah, how we study it, even how we, do politics, how
Thanks,
we
Sarah.
participate.
It's really a fascinating area.
Oh, it is.
Even just a few years ago, this wasn't even a thing.
No.
And now
It's moving so fast.
it's moving so fast, and it's really having a huge impact.
Huge.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Just a few decades ago,
Yeah.
political scientists, they were really limited in what they could do.
Yeah. Surveys, polls.
They're doing surveys and polls.
A lot of, like painstaking reading through documents,
Right, like counting things by hand
Yeah.
and just crunching numbers
For-
forever.
There.
And now we have these systems that can do all that, but so much faster.
So much faster on so much more data.
And arguably, more accurately.
Yeah, arguably that's the
It
question.
was one of the big questions.
It is.
But it really feels like a whole new era of political science is upon us.
I think it is.
And, thinking about like historical comparisons,
Yeah.
like, think about the advent of television in the 60s,
Oh, yeah.
like how that changed presidential elections.
I mean, changed everything. The ways candidates campaign,
The issues they focused on.
the issues they focused on, how the public even perceived them.
Yeah.
Television really just changed, everything about a presidential election.
And so it seems like LLMs could have a similar impact,
Yeah.
but even more so because it's not just changing the medium.
It's changing the tools.
It's changing the tools that we use
the actual tools we use.
to understand and do politics.
Exactly.
And so, okay,
Mhm.
so LLMs are powerful, clearly.
They are.
But how do they really work? How do they work in politics?
Yeah.
This political LLM framework that you've mentioned
Yeah.
seems like a good place to start to unpack all of this.
It is. It is. It's kind of a, it's like a way of organizing all of this new research and application.
Yeah, okay.
And it focuses on two main things,
Okay.
which are, the traditional tasks of political science that we've always done, and then the computational methods that that LLMs bring to the table.
Okay, so break those down for me a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you say like political tasks,
Yeah.
like what kinds of things are we talking about?
So imagine, you're a political scientist and you're trying to understand, the factors that influenced the outcome of, let's say, the 2020 election.
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally, you might look at things like demographic data,
Mhm.
right? And you might look at voter turnout, and you might look at economic indicators.
Sure.
And then you might do some, content analysis of, say, news coverage
Right.
or campaign speeches or something like that. And that would take a lot of time,
Right.
right? And it might be limited in scope.
Right. And you'd have to have a big team
Big team.
or a lot of money
Yeah, you need resources, definitely.
to do all that.
Yeah,
But an LLM could analyze all of that
all of that and then some.
and much more.
Yeah, so, I mean, it could be analyzing social media posts, right? You
Yeah.
could have it looking at online forums, looking at legislative records,
Right.
and it could do it all in a fraction of the time.
Yeah, really fast.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like a superpowered research assistant
it is. Yeah, it is. You can think of it that way.
that's sifting through all of that noise
It is, yeah. And then it can start to identify,
and finding these connections.
yeah, patterns and correlations that you would never see if you
Right.
were just doing it all by hand.
Right.
It can see things that you just can't see.
And it could also do things
Yeah,
like generate synthetic data,
exactly. Yeah,
which is interesting
it is.
because, like if you're studying, let's say, voter turnout and you have limited data on a certain demographic group,
Yeah,
you can use the LLM to kind of fill in those gaps
you can.
and create kind of like a more complete picture.
Yeah, more complete picture of the electorate, even when your data is patchy.
Right.
Yeah.
Which it often is.
Right.
It often is.
And so that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's just one example of
Yeah.
how LLMs are, really just changing.
Changing the game.
Yeah, changing the game. Yeah.
Okay, so what about that second part,
Mm-hmm.
the computational approaches?
Yeah, so think about it like this.
Yeah.
Back in the early days of computing, you had to program very specific instructions
Right.
for every single task you wanted the computer to do, right? And now we have machine learning, right? Where the computer learns from the data we feed it.
Right.
And that's a huge...
Yeah, I remember reading about some of those early political prediction models.
Oh, yeah.
They were very basic.
They were so basic. Like,
Yeah.
They would look at like economic growth,
Yeah, incumbency.
like incumbency, and like that was it.
And that was it. And they were often wrong, of course.
Right. Terribly wrong.
Terribly wrong, yeah. But
But LLMs are
they're a whole other level
a whole other level.
of sophistication.
Yeah.
So the computational approaches involve, training these models on massive data sets
Okay.
of political text and using really complex algorithms to process that data,
Right.
to analyze it and then fine-tune them for specific political tasks,
Right.
like predicting election outcomes or analyzing public sentiment on a particular issue or something like that.
I mean, it sounds incredibly complex.
It is.
Even something like analyzing public sentiment.
It's tough. Yeah, how do you teach a machine?
Yeah. All the nuance,
Sarcasm, slang, and...
all the cultural references.
Right. How do they even, make sense of that?
It's true. They are complex, and they're still very much
Under development.
under development, yeah. But they're getting better
But they're getting better.
all the time.
All the time. That's the amazing thing.
Yeah.
So, for example, researchers are training LLMs on just mountains of social media data, right?
Right.
To try to help them understand the nuances of language and detect subtle patterns in how people express their views.
I mean, I'm starting to really see the power of all this.
Yeah.
But with all this power
Yeah.
comes some pretty big questions.
Big questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do we know
Yeah.
these systems are actually giving us good information?
Yeah.
Accurate information, unbiased information.
That's right. That's where the limitations come in.
Right?
Right. That's where the potential pitfalls come in.
Right.
Because even the most advanced LLMs,
Mm-hmm.
they're still limited by the data we feed them.
Right. So it's that old.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
Problem.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure
How do we make sure?
we're not getting garbage out?
Well, there are a few things we can do.
Okay.
One is to really carefully curate the data that we're using to train these models, right?
Okay.
To make sure it's as diverse and representative as possible.
Okay.
So that's one thing.
Hmm.
Another thing is to actually develop methods for identifying and mitigating bias
Okay.
in the algorithms themselves.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we always need to be
Critical.
critical thinkers.
Right.
Right. You can't just take the output as gospel.
It's a starting point.
It's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
You have to use it to, launch further investigation and
Right.
do your own analysis.
It's a tool, not an answer.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful tool, but it's not the answer.
Right. And it also, it really points to the importance of
Yeah.
collaboration.
Collaboration, yeah,
With that.
between computer scientists, political scientists.
All right. And ethicists.
And ethicists, absolutely.
And all sorts of people.
All sorts of people, yeah.
Because this is not just a technical problem.
Yeah, it's not. It's a social problem. It's an ethical problem.
Yeah, it's all of those things.
It is.
Okay, so we've kind of laid the groundwork here.
Yeah.
It's clear that LLMs have the potential to really change political science.
Yeah.
So
Big time.
what are some of the most, interesting ways they're being used right now?
Well, let's dive into that
Okay.
in the next section.
All right.
We'll look at some specific examples
I'm excited.
of how LLMs are being used to predict election outcomes,
Yeah.
to generate realistic political scenarios, and even to analyze the language of political discourse
Ooh, that's interesting.
to understand, how public opinion is formed
Okay.
and how political narratives take hold.
Right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Let's start with one area where LLMs are having a huge impact already,
Okay.
and that's predicting election outcomes.
Yeah. Everyone's always fascinated by that.
Of course.
Like, who's going to win?
Who's going to win?
It seems like these systems might be able to give us a much clearer picture than those old, polling methods.
Yeah. I mean, polls can be really unreliable,
Yeah.
especially in close races.
Right.
And they really just give you a snapshot,
Right. Like a moment in time.
a moment in time, whereas
Right.
LLMs can analyze just massive amounts of data continuously.
Right. So it's more of like a
It's like a real-time
real time
pulse of what's happening.
Yeah. You can track shifts in public sentiment. You can identify emerging trends.
Catching those subtle shifts.
The things that you might miss otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. And this isn't just about predicting who's going to win.
Right.
I mean, LLMs can also help us understand
Why people vote the way they do.
why people vote the way they do,
Yeah,
what are the factors that influence
Right.
different demographic groups,
And that could help campaigns target their messaging.
Absolutely.
more effectively.
Absolutely, yeah.
It can even help policymakers craft policies. Right.
That are, more aligned with what people actually want.
Absolutely, addressing people's needs and concerns.
Right. Like, it makes me think about the 1980 election.
Yeah.
When Reagan's campaign used all that data analysis and micro-targeting
Oh, yeah.
to really appeal to certain groups of voters.
Yeah, the Reagan Democrats.
Yeah, like disaffected Democrats.
Yeah.
It really was like a turning point
It was.
with political campaigning.
Yeah, that was a big moment.
And it seems like LLMs can just, take that to a whole other level.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was a turning point in using data and technology in politics.
Right.
And this is, I think, the next evolution.
Yeah, it's like the next,
the next phase.
The next phase of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so LLMs are changing how we predict elections, how we understand voter behavior.
Yeah.
What other, political tasks are they good at?
Well, another area where they're proving incredibly valuable is in generating realistic political scenarios.
Okay, so what do you mean by that? What would happen if a certain policy was implemented?
Exactly.
Or, if a certain event happened?
Exactly. So you can use LLMs to create these complex simulations that take into account all sorts of factors, like trends, demographic shifts, public opinion, international relations.
Wow.
And then you can play out how all those factors might interact.
So it's like having a political crystal ball.
Kind of, yeah.
You can see what might happen.
You can explore different possibilities.
Right, and so policymakers could use that to test out different ideas.
Yeah, they could.
See what the consequences might be.
Absolutely.
Make better decisions.
That's the hope, yeah. But it's important to remember that these are just simulations.
Right.
I mean, they're based on the data that we put in.
Right. It's not a perfect...
It's not reality.
It's not reality.
Right, but it gives us a way to explore...
It gives us a testing ground.
Well, it does, a testing ground, yeah, to think through the consequences of different actions.
So it's not replacing human judgment.
No.
It's more like...
It's augmenting it.
Augmenting.
Yeah, it's giving us more tools.
Giving them more tools.
To make those judgments.
It's almost like a political chess game.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You can kind of game out different strategies.
You can.
See what the challenges might be.
Might happen.
Right, and anticipate your opponent's moves.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's interesting because, I think in chess...
Yeah.
The best players are the ones who can think several moves ahead.
Absolutely.
And so it's like LLMs can help political actors, whether they're, policymakers or campaign people or even just citizens,
right,
become better chess players.
Better players in this complex game.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Thanks.
Okay, so LLMs can help us predict elections. They can create these realistic scenarios, help us make more informed decisions. But what about understanding how people even form their political beliefs in the first place?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right. Can LLMs help us with that?
They can, absolutely.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, one of the most exciting areas of research is using LLMs to analyze the language of political discourse.
So, how politicians talk.
How politicians talk, how the media frames issues.
How we talk to each other online.
How we talk online, yeah.
I mean, I've always been fascinated by that.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
How language shapes perceptions and mobilizes people.
It's powerful stuff.
Like magic sometimes.
It can be.
And so you're saying, LLMs can help us understand that magic a little bit.
They can, yeah. For example, researchers are using LLMs to analyze political speeches and figure out, what are the rhetorical strategies that are most effective at persuading different audiences.
So instead of just relying on our gut,
right,
you can actually, see what works.
You can see what works, yeah.
Why? That's really interesting.
And it goes beyond speeches, too, right?
Okay.
I mean, LLMs can analyze social media posts. They can analyze news articles, online forums, even legislative texts, right?
Wow.
To understand how these political narratives take hold.
Right.
How information spreads.
How public opinion is shaped.
How public opinion is shaped over time.
Yeah, it's we're getting this... behind-the-scenes look.
Yeah, behind the curtain.
At how it all works.
Yeah, that the sausage is made, right.
Right.
And that can be really powerful.
Right, because you can use that to,
absolutely.
identify misinformation.
You can, yeah.
You can develop better ways of communicating complex issues.
Exactly.
You can even, design platforms that promote more civil discourse.
Absolutely, that's the hope.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're moving towards...
That's really interesting.
Yeah, we're moving towards a more data-driven, evidence-based approach.
Right, you understand what works, what doesn't work,
exactly,
and why. This is really fascinating.
It is.
But, I mean, I can't help but wonder, like, what are the downsides?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about bias in the data earlier.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are other challenges and limitations.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That researchers are kind of grappling with.
They are. And I think one of the biggest ones
Okay.
is this issue of explainability.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
Yeah, so, as we've discussed, LLMs are incredibly complex systems.
Right.
I mean, they make predictions, they generate these outputs based on millions of calculations.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard to understand exactly how they arrived at those outputs.
So it's like they're giving us answers.
They are.
But they're not showing their work.
Not showing their work, exactly.
And so how do we know?
How do we trust it?
If we don't know how they got there.
How do we trust it? Right. And this is a big problem, especially when we're talking about political issues, right?
Right. Because it's high stakes.
It's high stakes, right?
Right.
So imagine an LLM is, predicting the outcome of an election or recommending a certain policy. If we don't understand why it made those predictions, it's really hard to trust it.
Yeah. And it's hard to hold anyone accountable if things go wrong.
Exactly. That's the other problem.
Right. Right. It's like, I don't know, it's like a judge issuing a ruling.
Yeah.
But not giving any reasons for it.
Without explaining the reason.
Yeah, like they might be right.
They might be.
But if you don't know why, it undermines the whole system.
It does. It undermines trust in the whole system.
Yeah.
And that's why this idea of explainability is so important.
Okay.
So researchers are really working on ways to make these LLMs more transparent.
So like opening up that black box.
Opening up the black box, yeah.
Seeing how it works.
So we can trace back their reasoning to the data and understand how they arrived at their conclusions.
Right. And I guess ultimately, if we're going to use these systems to make decisions that affect people's lives,
absolutely,
we have to be able to trust them.
We do.
And trust is built on transparency.
Transparency and accountability.
Okay, so explainability is one challenge.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ones?
Well, another big one is data scarcity.
Okay.
Right? I mean, as powerful as LLMs are, they still need massive amounts of data to be effective.
Yeah.
And in some areas of political science, especially when you're looking at specific countries, regions, historical periods, that data may be limited.
Right. So I imagine it's much harder to study like a new democracy that doesn't have a lot of digital records than it is to study like U.S. elections.
Absolutely.
But we have tons of data.
Tons of data, yeah.
Going back decades.
Yeah, and that's why researchers are working on these techniques for generating synthetic data.
Right. So it's like
using LLMs.
Using LLMs to create data.
To create data.
To train other LLMs.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like they're bootstrapping themselves.
They are. It's kind of amazing.
That's really interesting.
It's a fascinating area of research.
Yeah. Okay. So explainability, data scarcity. What else? What other challenges are there?
Well, one that we've touched on already, but I think deserves more attention, is the issue of bias and fairness in LLM outputs.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a really sensitive issue when we're talking about politics.
It is. It is.
Because if these systems are going to be used to inform decisions or, to shape campaigns, we need to make sure that they're not perpetuating harmful biases.
Absolutely. And it's not just about avoiding like overt discrimination.
Right.
It's also about making sure they don't like subtly reinforce existing power structures.
Absolutely.
Or disadvantage certain groups.
I imagine a system trained mainly on like mainstream media sources might miss like nuances in the political discourse.
It might.
Of, marginalized communities.
It might, yeah. And it might make predictions that don't accurately reflect
their political reality.
Their realities, yeah.
Right. And
that's why it's so important to have diverse teams working on these systems.
Right. So people from different backgrounds, different
perspectives, who can help identify these biases.
Right. So it's really about building these systems with equity and fairness in mind.
From the ground up.
Yeah.
From the very beginning.
From the data to the algorithms to the people who are designing them.
Yeah.
And it's not a one-time fix either, right?
It's a constant process.
It's an ongoing process.
It's like building a just society.
It is.
You have to be constantly challenging your assumptions.
Challenging your assumptions, questioning your biases, and trying to create systems that work for everyone.
That work for everyone, yeah. That's the goal.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
We have.
From the possibilities to the challenges. So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to approach these technologies with both curiosity and skepticism. Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, demand transparency.
Right, because these are powerful tools.
They are powerful tools.
But we need to make sure they're used responsibly.
Responsibly and ethically.
Right. It's like, any tool can be used for good or for bad.
It can, that's right.
It's up to us to decide how we're going to use it.
That's right. And that brings us to the final part of our discussion.
Okay.
The future of political LLM.
Ooh.
So what are the big trends to watch, the key challenges to address, and the exciting possibilities that lie ahead?
It sounds like we're going to have to pick up there.
We are.
In the next part of this deep dive. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the present.
The here and now.
Yeah, the here and now.
Yeah.
But now let's look ahead.
To the future?
To the future, what's on the horizon?
What's coming?
For political LLMs.
Yeah, I think one trend that's really exciting is the increasing accessibility of these tools.
Okay.
Just a few years ago, working with LLMs required a lot of specialized knowledge and expensive computing resources.
Yeah, you had to have like a whole lab setup.
Yeah, pretty much. But now, thanks to, open source models and cloud-based platform.
Right, it's becoming more available.
It's becoming much more accessible to researchers, journalists, activists.
Wow.
Even everyday citizens.
So, that's a huge shift, right? It kind of reminds me of the early days of the internet.
Oh, yeah.
When it was mostly universities.
Yeah, government agencies.
And then all of a sudden, everybody had access to information and ways to connect with each other that just weren't possible before.
So, could LLMs kind of democratize access to political analysis in a similar way?
I think they could, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine a world where anyone can use an LLM to analyze political speeches, to track campaign spending, even to simulate the potential impact of different policies.
So it gives people more power?
It empowers citizens to hold their leaders accountable.
To really participate.
Yeah, participate in a more informed way.
Yeah, that's a really powerful vision.
It is.
But, it also raises some questions about how we ensure these tools are used responsibly.
Responsibly and ethically.
Right. We've seen what happened with social media.
Yeah, we have.
All the misinformation.
Manipulation.
Right, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, couldn't LLMs be misused in a similar way?
They could, absolutely. It's a concern. It's a real concern.
Yeah.
But I think we can learn from those mistakes.
Okay.
Right? We can learn from what happened with social media and start building in safeguards now.
Right. From the beginning.
From the beginning, yeah. So, for example, we could develop tools that help people identify AI-generated content.
Right. So it's not a real person?
Exactly.
Okay.
We can educate the public about the risks.
Right, like media literacy.
Media literacy, exactly. And we can also create regulations that prevent the use of these technologies for malicious purposes.
So it's kind of like, you're giving people these powerful tools.
You are.
But you're also trying to, protect them from the potential harms.
Yeah, it's a balance.
Yeah, like a delicate balance.
It is.
And it's not just about protecting individuals either, right?
No, it's not.
We have to think about the impact on
our institutions.
Our democracy.
Our democracy.
Could we end up in a situation where, elections are decided by algorithms?
Yeah, that's a scary thought, right?
It is. It's like a sci-fi movie.
It is. Like the machines are running the show.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah.
Is that a real possibility?
It is. I think it's a possibility we have to take seriously.
Okay.
But I also believe that LLMs can be used to strengthen democracy, not to weaken it.
So, how would that work?
Well, for example, they could be used to identify and combat voter suppression efforts.
Okay.
They could be used to make it easier for people to register to vote.
Right.
Find information about candidates and issues.
So making the system more accessible.
More accessible, more transparent.
Wow.
They could even be used to create platforms that foster more civil and productive political discourse online.
Yeah, so it's using these tools to make our political systems more More transparent.
More transparent.
More accountable.
More accountable, more accessible.
Right, accessible to everyone.
To everyone, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like
yeah,
almost like a new era.
It is. It's like a new frontier.
Yeah, like a new frontier of political like engagement and participation.
Absolutely, and it's going to require a lot of collaboration.
Yeah.
Between technologists, policymakers, ethicists, citizens.
Right, everyone has to be involved.
Everyone has to be involved, yeah.
To make sure this goes in the right direction.
Absolutely. We need to have open and honest conversations with the potential benefits and risks.
Right.
And work together.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think about like the progressive era.
Oh, interesting.
In the U.S., you know, in the early 20th century.
Yeah.
Like, we had all this rapid industrialization.
Yeah, huge technological changes.
Huge technological changes.
Leading to inequality. Yeah, all sorts of social problems.
And it was really through, like, reformers and activists.
Pushing for change.
Pushing for change.
Yeah.
That we started to address those challenges.
That's right.
You know, things like government regulations.
Yeah, social safety nets.
Right, greater democratic participation.
Absolutely. That's a great historical comparison.
And it seems like we might be entering a similar period with AI.
I think we are.
Where we have to adapt.
Adapt, yeah, as a society.
I mean, new institutions.
New institutions, new ethical frameworks.
And really rethink how we govern ourselves.
Yeah, how we govern ourselves in the age of AI.
Yeah.
Big questions.
Big questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the challenges, the opportunities.
Yeah.
But I'm also kind of curious about, like, the more, like, speculative side of things.
The wild possibilities.
Yeah, like, what are some of the things that you see on the horizon that really, like, excite you?
You get me excited. Well, one possibility that really captures my imagination is the development of AI systems that can actually facilitate what's called deliberative democracy.
Okay, hold on. Deliberative democracy, what's that?
So it's a model of democracy where citizens are really engaged in like reasoned, informed discussion to try to reach consensus on important issues.
Okay, so it's kind of like moving beyond the shouting matches.
The polarized debates
that we see now.
Yeah, all the negativity.
All the negativity.
And trying to find common ground.
Right, finding that common ground.
Based on shared values and evidence.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds idealistic.
It does.
But it also sounds very appealing.
It does, especially these days.
Right, in our current climate. But I mean, how could LLMs actually help facilitate that?
Well, imagine a platform where citizens could use LLMs to access unbiased information about complex issues, to generate different policy options, to even simulate the impact.
So everyone's working with the same information.
The same information, the same tools.
It's like a virtual town hall.
It is. It's like a virtual town hall.
Where everyone's on the same page.
On the same page, exactly. Yeah. And it could go even further, right? I mean, LLMs could be used to identify areas of agreement, disagreement, help people understand different perspectives, and even facilitate constructive dialogue between people who might hold opposing views.
I mean, that sounds pretty utopian.
It does sound utopian.
But, I mean, is it even possible? Like, how do you make sure the AI is actually neutral?
It's a huge challenge, both technically and socially.
Right.
But I think it's a challenge worth pursuing.
Because if you could pull it off...
If we could pull it off.
I mean, it would really transform how we do things.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine if we could create a system that allows people to engage in this kind of reasoned and informed deliberation.
Right. It changes everything.
It could change everything. The way we make decisions, solve problems, even the way we relate to each other as citizens.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like we're talking about, like, a new political enlightenment.
Yeah, it's like an Enlightenment 2.0.
An Enlightenment 2.0 where technology helps us
think better.
Right, to be more informed.
To be more informed, more engaged.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really inspiring vision.
It is, and I think it captures what a lot of people in this field are working towards.
Right, it's not just about building the tools.
It's about using them.
It's about, how are we going to use them?
To make our democracy better.
Right, to enhance our democracy.
Not to diminish it.
Yeah, and that's a future that I think we can all get behind.
I think so, too.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
Fascinating, yeah.
And to you, dear listener, we hope you found this exploration of political LLM informative and engaging.
Absolutely.
As we've seen, these technologies have the potential to really change how we understand and engage with politics.
Yeah, big time.
They offer these amazing opportunities for analysis, prediction, participation.
Unprecedented opportunities.
But they also raise some really important questions.
Yeah.
About bias, fairness, transparency, the future of democracy.
Yeah, all the big questions.
All the big questions.
Yeah.
And so we encourage you to keep exploring this topic.
Stay informed.
Stay informed, engage in conversations.
Absolutely.
About how we can make sure these tools are used for good.
For the benefit of all.
For the benefit of all.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we all have a role to play.
We do.
In shaping the future of AI and politics.
We do.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.